Hello, everyone. Welcome to International Coaching Week. This is our second collaboration session today. We have a very interesting topic that's close to many of our hearts. So, as I said before we start recording, we have our familiar faces from the community showing up, and also we have some new members joining from our global ICF professional community. So, hi, colleagues, whether you are new here or you are a recurring member of our community, I am so glad and truly honored to be able to share this and growth with all of you. So, with that, respecting your time, I would like to begin our conversation without further ado.
Welcome.
Today, I have something quite packed information sharing to go with. So let's begin. All right. Colleagues, as I speak, I only see myself. I will not be able to see all of you as I'm making a video. So if you have anything that you would like to share, please feel free to share in the chat box, because if you raise your hand digitally also, I will not see you. So, all right, with that, welcome once again to Ignite Global. We are 360 coach education specialization provider, fully accredited by the International Coaching Federation as level 3 program providers. So we are celebrating International Coaching Week. And with that, I would like to wish you all happy coaching week. I hope you continue to share your knowledge, your wisdom, and your skills in helping people transform their lives. If you're wondering, if you're new here, my name is Lux Hettiadra. I'm a professional certified coach. Also, I'm the creator of the world's first ICF accredited coach education specialization encompassing child adolescent development and parenting, and I'm also a counseling psychologist. So today, this is part of our continued professional development masterclass. So meaning, like we mentioned in our um, uh, pre-materials, that you will gain your CCE certification with this conversation today, within this session. So today, we have, as I said, we have a very interesting topic that many of us are curious about. And this is actually the continuation of our conversation from yesterday. Yesterday, we discussed another aspect of developmental coaching, which is parenting part of it. So yesterday, we discussed why, as parents, as professionals, we often get stuck. The transformation gets stuck in reactivity and behavior management rather than being able to go beyond and seeing where these behavioral challenges really come from. So today, I'm going to show you the other side of developmental coaching, right? Because when we look at the development of a child, I believe that we all understand that we cannot look at the child's development in isolation, because a child never grows up in isolation, right? Even, let's say, within the absence of parents, they are still under some caregiving relational environment. So therefore, children don't exist in isolation, and parenting and family systems is huge part of a child. So this is why when we work, so if we are working with just a child, or if we are just working with the parent, I hope that as you have been through the previous session and today, as I continue to share, I hope that you will realize, I believe that you already know, but today I hope that your understanding will deepen why bringing the parenting and family systems and the child together and address this as a whole So this is what we are going to do. Today, I am going to be focusing on coaching application on children and adolescents, which is the developing brain. And let's look at, I'm not generalizing, but let's see why some of us can't coach, as professionals who are trained to work with the developed brain, why can't we use the same skill set to work with children? So again, as usual, a gentle reminder, as we discuss parenting, family dynamics, child development related topics, sometimes these insights can trigger us because we all have lived a life. We used to be children, we have a childhood. So sometimes when we listen to certain insights, some of those memories, stresses, emotional responses can show up. So if something like that happens, please feel free to do what is necessary, even if that means that you need to step out of this conversation. That's completely all right. And also to maintain a supportive and uninterrupted environment, I kindly invite you to keep your microphones muted at all times unless we collaborate in discussion, just to be respectful, and also feel free to actively engage in the discussion in the chat room, share your insights, ask your questions. I truly enjoy your interactions, colleagues, because that's also how we collectively learn, right? I can only share with you the knowledge I know, the research I have done, the education I have been through, and my own experiences. But I know that some of you are, all of you actually have many different levels of experiences and knowledge. So we all benefit from that. And with that, let's also be respectful, compassionate, given that we all come from different cultural family backgrounds. So let's be kind to one another. So now, colleagues, before we move on, I want to show you a few scenarios that you might have been, not necessarily like yesterday. I will not take a full case study because today I want to show you share some neuroscience. So because of that, I thought I will show you a few areas that you probably have already encountered. So whether you're a professional or a parent, have you ever been in these situations? Have you ever encountered a child who struggles academically despite receiving, say, extra support, tutoring, or repeated instruction? And you probably wonder why the child still isn't trying hard enough, or why are they not getting it? Have you ever worked with a child who cannot sit still, constantly move or interrupts, fidgets, or seems so-called hyperactive, and notice how quickly adults label them as disruptive or badly behaved? I have seen this over and over and over. I used to be an active in the facility, and in my early career, I started as an educator, especially in early and primary schools. And one of the things that broke my heart the most, and I lost my belief completely in traditional education, colleagues, is because the way I saw how quickly some of our educators, I'm not blaming them, right? Like I said, I come to this place with deep compassion, but I'm also going to speak the truth. And some educators, even the educational systems, how they were so focused on the behavior, and how we gave children labels that this child has this, they are hyperactive, they might be this, so we have to make a big fuss about this, and then the child has to go to this person, and then child comes out of that clinic labeled, having some kind of a label. And I believe I don't need to tell you what these labels are, and then we live for the rest of our life. I'm not talking about getting a child checked by an appropriate professional and having certain conditions diagnosed, and providing that support isn't necessary. It is absolutely necessary. Please do not get me in any way. Don't misunderstand this. That's not my intention. What I'm saying is, before we get to that, before we start problem solving and behavior management, how quickly we are to assume just by observing a child's behavior how quickly we label, not realizing these children are going to live with these labels, these emotional, psychological labels for the rest of their lives, right? So I'm sure you may have seen these environments and you probably will be able to resonate. As you can see, I'm getting very passionate because I have first-hand experienced this. So uh, it makes me sweat a little bit. So nothing taken personally though. Right. Have you ever encountered a teenager, perhaps, who appears lazy, unmotivated, or addicted to screen? So we have a lot of frustration, and we diagnose that behavior, and even like I said, the labels again. Have you ever seen a child who has emotional outburst over seemingly over small things, crying, screaming, shutting down, or becoming aggressive? And you might be wondering what is going on. Why is this so frequent? Have you ever encountered a child who refused to go to school or struggled to separate from parents, complaints of stomach aches or headaches, or becomes distressed before school and considered that the issue may go far beyond probably attention seeking? Or have you ever worked with a teenager who appears rude, perhaps even withdrawn and defiant, or emotionally distant? One way or the other, whether you are a professional coach or any other type of development specialist, educator, a parent, I believe that you may have seen at least one of these somewhere. Might have even be you yourself as a child. Right. So before, sorry about that. So before I get to the next stage of our conversation, colleagues, I want to share a case study, actually, a real situation. So the child is a girl, um, a family of 4 people, parent and the 2 parents and the sibling and the child, the girl. And this girl had all these problems, didn't like to go to school, and she struggled in school so badly that it affected her self-esteem so much because she grew up believing that she is stupid. And I'm using these words because this is what the reality is, right? The conversations, what comes out is this. And struggled with studies so much, but however, there were no developmental issues, challenges, concerns like that, or at least wasn't diagnosed at the time. However, she continued to struggle throughout her studies, throughout her early, middle, adolescent years, through studies. She loved learning specific subjects, but at the same time, she hated school, educators, and at all that in school environment. And somehow she couldn't get herself to focus. And also, there were other behavioral challenges, like she was often in her family system perceived as the troublemaker. She was very quiet. She was a very quiet girl, always preferred to be alone, to work alone, to study alone, to play alone. Everything she did since her childhood, she did them alone. She did not have many friends, and she in fact struggled to make friends. And so she somehow, with struggles, she completed her education and everything. And by age 16, at the age of 16, it was her first attempt to commit suicide. And this is when she was diagnosed with clinical depression. And then throughout her entire life, she had to live with that and work through that to get to her life. And the girl I'm speaking about is no one but myself, colleagues. And I'm not coming into this space with wanting to talk about myself or making it about myself. And I'm definitely not here uh, with pittiness or uh, victimized mindset or this happened to me. This is not about me. The reason why I am sharing this story with you is this is why this program came to be. I struggled so much in my life as a child. I felt so cornered and invisible, inadequate. I felt I was the only person alive. There were moments that I have felt as a adolescent that there were moments I felt I was underground and I was screaming. I was screaming for help, and no one could help me. No one could hear me because I was underground. And this is why this program is. So when I went through that difficulty through my entire childhood, adolescent years studying, and it made me so passionate that I became crazy about psychology. I became crazy about education. And I wanted to become an educator because I wanted to make a difference. And so I studied early childhood education. That was my very first degree, my BA. I studied early childhood education. And when I went into the school system and I realized, oh, this is exactly what I wanted not to do. I didn't want to do this. And I realized I was back to where I began and I wasn't doing anything important. I wasn't doing what I wanted to do. I didn't understand it the way that I understand it now, but I knew it wasn't what I wanted to do at the time. So this is when I was introduced to Montessori education. If you are an educator, if you know about different methodologies, you may have heard Montessori education is to be one of the most powerful, most effective education methods in the world because it keeps the child's developing brain in the center. And when I experienced that, when I went through that education journey, I studied in a convent with nuns and lots of children in a practical environment, and I couldn't get enough of it. I couldn't get enough of it because I found what I was searching for. And so my passion developed and I continued to study. I worked in different facilities. I traveled. I worked internationally in different settings, understanding different cultures and so on. And this is throughout the journey, I was introduced to coaching. And then there was this moment, my brother, Fernando Hetiadro, who is the founder of Ignite Global, he's the love of my life, my brother, who raised me. I will tell you my story as we go through this presentation. He raised me. He's my best friend. And we were talking about the impact. We always talk about the impact that we can create in the world because we come from interesting background, which I will reveal to you if you don't know us. So we talk about how can we bring coaching science into children education. And this is when we started our research on how can we apply coaching skills, ICF framework, into developmental areas like education, child development, and parenting, because we realize this is where the problem is. If educators can have coaching skills, we can change this world at least to a greater degree in just one generation. Think about it. If every parent held coaching skills, how different the way we raise children would be. And this was our intention. So this program came to be. So the reason why I am sharing this story, colleagues, I want you to know that this is not just a specialization for me, for my brother or Ignite Global. This is a mission. We are not just looking at coaching one child, one parent at a time, but we are looking at a developmental, systematic change that is going to last, generational transformation beginning today. So thank you, thank you for listening, and thank you for giving me the space to share my story, which will be part of our learning experience today. And more than anything, thank you very much for believing in the work that we did. You could have been anywhere in the world today, but you decided to show up for this conversation because there is something in your heart that resonated with this message. So I want to honor that, and I truly am feeling so grateful right now to be able to collaborate with such intentional group of individuals like you who share the same passion as me. Because as you can see, this is not just another certification for me, right? All right. So with that, now let's get to theory and practical application. So let's look at the core components of ICF coaching framework. I know that many of you are coming from our global coaching network, so you are very well aware of advanced coaches. I know some of you are credential coaches, much more experience than me. I'm a BCC still, and I know some of you have much more experience than even me. So when we look at our core competency, our beautiful ICF framework, you know that there are 4 components to ICF framework. The very first one is goal, which is the heart of a coaching session. You know that without a goal, there is no coaching conversation, right? This is basic knowledge. And then we have the awareness part. In order for the client to achieve the goal, we need to create deeper awareness. So we have even specific competency related to this. And then we have the action component. Within the awareness towards the goal, client needs to develop action. But we also know we don't just stop with actions, but we also help the client create accountability. So these are the parts of a regular coaching conversation according to ICF framework. Now, let's look at the core components of ICF accredited CADP, Child Adolescent Development and Parenting Coaching Framework, because it takes a different direction here. So earlier you saw the triangle, and now here it has become a pentagon. The reason is, so of course we have the goal, we still have awareness. However, what is difference is here we need to integrate child development and parenting education, because without this component, if you are in a developmental coaching realm, that is incomplete. And then, of course, we have actions, and then, as usual, we have the accountability, right? So let's briefly look at the key differences between coaching adults and coaching minors before we actually go into our real conversations. We are still just tippy-toeing around the surface stuff, right? So we have coaching adults, coaching children. Developmental status. We know that adult brain is fully developed. Their prefrontal cortex is developed, meaning they have the regulatory skills, decision-making, all the executive functions top on. However, children, they don't have the same capacity. Their brain is not fully developed. They don't have the same prefrontal frontal lobe capacity, or even the limbic system, which is our emotional brain. It's not fully developed yet, even in adolescence. Role of insights. You know that insights and awareness are primary drivers of change, right? Change occurs through insight. Regulation and safety must come before insight, awareness emerges through the experience. And this is what we are going to be looking at today from a neuroscience perspective, colleagues. I'm going to show you the neuroscience of learning, right? And self-regulation capacity, adults, we expect at least, if it's, let's say, neurotypical brain without any, let's say, mental health concerns, regulation is, we expect it to be normal. However, with children don't have regulatory skills. They don't have the awareness. Therefore, they entirely depend on the parent or the professional for co-regulation. And goal orientation, adults come to you, they know what they want, they pay, and they will make sure they work towards those goals because they have paid you. And they are desperate for some of those goals, and they're so passionate about the goals. So they don't need external motivation. However, children like that. They can't set their own goals because they don't have the developmental capacity to do that, or emotional literacy, or confidence, or agency. Use of language and reflection, you know that they are able to fully comprehend what they are speaking, if whatever the language that they are speaking of. However, children cannot comprehend what they are feeling, thinking, their inner experience. They cannot comprehend or verbally convey the same way adults do. We think they can, but they cannot. When you learn the brain, when you learn the developmental neuroscience, you learn that it's not possible. So we have lots of truly developmentally unrealistic expectations for our children. And then we blame thinking that they misbehave, but it's actually we are uninformed. System involvement, you know that we talk about external systems with adults, but they are not directly involved unless it's part of their goal. However, with children, there are multiple systems. Yesterday, in just 2 hours, that masterclass, we talk about 3 types of systems, 2 internal systems and 1 external system, which was so complicated already. I think some of our colleagues were a little bit overwhelmed. I'm so sorry. I apologize if the session was too heavy. I think some of our I had that feeling. So in case if the session was too heavy yesterday, I'll try to make them a bit lighter next time. An application of coaching framework, you know that we apply directly coaching competencies. However, with children, we need to translate it to developmental framework. The traditional coaching competency application doesn't work because, like I said, children do not comprehend their inner or external world the same way adults do. Neither can they communicate that. So we need to be very creative. We need to be flexible. We need to have a whole new different level of set of skills. Autonomy and consent, out of the question. This is an adult. We don't have to even worry about it. However, with adolescents, children, ethics and power dynamics it comes to play. So we need to be very careful about safeguarding, consent, child protection, all those things, even being aware of child abuse, how those will show up. And these are things that we actually study in our program, because when you work with a child, we expect ideal, perfect world. But when you go into the real world, you will see, colleagues, it's only a fantasy. Now, as we are looking at the the distinguish between coaching adults and coaching children, very briefly, please know that today, just like yesterday, I can only share the pebble of the ocean. So I will try to show you as much as possible without overwhelming you. Now, as we look at the 2 sides, I think the next natural question occur is, so how do children develop, right? This is a question that we must ask as a developmental coach. Okay, sure. Now, as you all know, this is Princess of Wales, and she initiated a campaign in I think 2023 or early 2022, it's called Shaping Us, and founded by the Center for Early Childhood Royal Foundation. And they conducted a research study, and it's so interesting when I read that, just that data. I mean, this is just only one founding colleagues, but according to the campaign, just in 2023, it's not that far behind. only about 36 adults knew fairly little about early childhood, only little bit or nothing at all. Now, this includes parents, educators, professionals. Doesn't mean that there is a lack of, like, for example, if it's a professional, I don't mean to say there is a lack of theoretical understanding, but there is a clear gap in applying those fundamental developmental knowledge into our day-to-day practical life, even in parenting. There is a huge gap in knowledge and skill development. Now, with that in mind, at Ignite Global, as we have initiated this movement altogether, colleagues, we see children as whole and complete, even a tiny little newborn. And you will see what this means throughout this conversation. So have in mind this little acorn that you are seeing here, because I believe, honestly, this is how I perceive every child. Every time I have an opportunity to engage with a child, I see them as a magnificent seed that I don't know the potential that they are inherently carrying within. Who am I to judge? Who am I to label that they have this, they have that, and they need this fixing, they have to be trained or tamed? Who am I to decide that? So, for me, colleagues, whenever I have the opportunity to interact with a child, whether it's in the facility or it's online, it's the most sacred place I ever enter, because I know I have the direct access to a developing human brain, a developing nervous system. That is something that I cannot take lightly, because it's like a block of clay. Every word, every interaction, every look I give them shape their brain, just like that block of clay. And this is why I am so passionate about this subject, and I create awareness everywhere possible. So thank you once again being part of that conversation. So this is where, colleagues, we see this speciality, this specialized coaching approach as developmental coaching, because within this few slides that we observed today, I hope you now see that the moment you work with a parent or a child and adolescent developing brain, you are no longer a generalist coach. You are no longer a life coach. You are a developmental coach. Because let's say you are only working with the parent, but still that parent is going to go home and that discussion is going to impact the child's developing brain. Every decision a parent make, even how a parent breathe next to a child. I'll show you an interesting video what I'm talking about. Even the way a parent breathe next to a child shape their life internally. So think about you as a coach. You directly work with their neuroplasticity. You engage their cortexes directly through reflections, through goal setting, bringing them to actions. That's what we do. So we are developmental coaches in this space. And this is why being informed, aware, especially trauma and developmental awareness is important. So this is why we look at developmental coaching through whole child development. And I know this is a common word used in many developmental models, which is amazing. I think this is exactly where our attention need to be, perceiving children as just a tiny somebody existing in a corner of the room. We know that this is not just a miniature adult. This is a child, a whole system growing up and going to become on its own person. It's whole. This is what I said. Even a tiny little newborn is whole and complete. So when we look at the whole child development, what we are looking at is, instead of like looking at the one layered, we look at multi-layered of development of a child, their brain, their nervous system, their emotions. So instead of focusing on the behavior or the performance or academic outcomes, we focus on the child's emotional safety, their relational needs, their cognitive growth, their physical well-being, their identity formation, their sense of urgency, and all these within family, school, and cultural system. And this is what we studied yesterday, the family, excuse me, the family ecosystem, so that we cover all, excuse me, we cover all that. Because if we did not look at a child's ecosystem, a family's ecosystem, how can we possibly look at that child as whole child? It's just not practical, right? So this is where, colleagues, we look at children's development through biopsychosocial development perspective. So what does that mean? I know I'm using a lot of technical words today. This is why I said today's session is going to be quite lecture type, and I want to share with you some neuroscience. So please bear with me. And if you are a psychologist, this is basic knowledge for you. But colleagues, if you are completely new to this space, please bear with me and make some notes and do your studies later. And also, these slides will be available to you at a later point. Whenever our team release the video, you will also have the slides coming your way. So you also have that. So when we look at biosocial development, this is where we understand that human beings are interconnected layers at the same time, rather than just reducing a person to just a symptom or a behavior, right? Often what happens is, especially when parents come to work with you for their child, you will hear what they highlight is the behavioral challenges, and that's what they expect you to solve. That's the problem you solve. So now, do you see, if you are solving behavioral issues, you need to know where they come from and how does the development impact that behavior. That's what we do through looking at child development through biopsychosocial development. So we look at a child as, of course, a biological being, meaning they have a brain, they have a body, genetics, neurosystem, nervous system, they have hormones, nutrition, all those things is a person, right? The existence, the body. And then we look at the psychological development of a child, the inner world of the child, their thoughts, beliefs, meaning making, cognitive processing, emotions, emotional awareness, and emotional regulation. How do children regulate? Trauma, attachment patterns, all these things go into psychological development. Then we look at the child's social development, which is family. Remember, every child's social circle begin within a family system. Their first social encounter is their caregivers, and then the rest of the family members in their family system. So, meaning their family dynamics, caregiving relationships, their peers, educators, community, culture, the countries that they live in, all that. So, these are the three aspects that we look at: biological, psychological, and social. So this is what we said earlier. A person is combined with three interconnected large systems, and this is just only one side of it. So when we look at a child's developmental needs, now we understand they are developing neurologically. As we work with them, as we speak with them, their neural connections are being created. So there is a cognitive development, how they think, believe, all that. And then psychosocial, which is emotional and social development. And then, of course, their physical development, their language and literacy development, right? We are adults, so we never really think about oh, I need to consider the adult's language and literacy development. We don't have to think about when you work with an adult. Why would we? When you work with a child, we need to have in mind they are still growing up. That means I need to take into consideration that they are also going through a language and literacy development stages. And then, of course, moral development. Now, none of these things can be developed without a caregiver modeling them properly. So, now, very briefly, colleagues, because we are looking at developmental coaching, we also need to understand that not all children develop in the same way either. Right? So today I'm going to show you just only two types of, given we have only very limited time, I want to keep it condensed. So let's look at two different type of development. One is the neurotypical development, which is the neurodivergent development. Now, let's come to this, right? We all know this man. And these golden words, I can't get enough of this. Everybody is a genius. It's how true is that? But if you judge a fish by its ability to climb a tree, it will live its whole life believing that it is, you know what, stupid. And I think some of us are still here. Some of us are still here. Maybe not you, but I believe that you know someone who is still here. And this is why I said, colleagues, the moment I was in the traditional education system, I realized I cannot stand this, because what we do is there is a system, very rigid system that someone thought that this is how it should be. I know that it's not all bad. It's for a reason. At the time it did work. It was how it was. So there is this education system. And what do? There is a child, let's take the child and put it into the system. We do not take any of those developmental considerations, developmental needs into considerations. We just take the child, we put them into the structure. Pre-existing system that is developed for who? And then this is when my perception of education changed, when I came to understand Montessori philosophy. The reason is in Montessori, Dr. Maria Montessori, she studied with children. From children, she learned that children are not a group of individuals that we can fit into a system. Instead, what she did was she observed children for years and years and years before she developed the method. She studied children, and then she came to understand, instead of fitting a child's developing brain into a system, what we need to do as developmental catalyst is to create an environment, a system around the child so that it fits their developmental need. I mean, when I say it like that, what an obvious realization, right? Isn't that how we all should be thinking? But isn't that surprising that we don't? So this is why, colleagues, we need to look at development from a very broader perspective. So when we look at the neurotypical development, that means it's the typical brain patterns, nervous system development, in which emotional, cognitive, and sensory, also our social skills, emerge relatively predictable in predictable ways, right? So we know that we can observe the same patterns in similar brain structures, and we know that these patterns are predictable and also for individually. So regulation, learning, social understanding are often acquired implicitly through observation, because they engage how a neurotypical brain would engage. So with more regulation and with more focus. However, in neurodivergent development, because of the neural variations in brain wiring and how the nervous system function, it shape how the person process their sensory input, emotions, information, and relationships. So this is where, rather than following the typical neurotypical patterns, neurodivergent child might develop attention, sensory processing, communication, emotional regulation, learning patterns in different sequences or intensities and completely different rhythm to neurotypical brain. But does that mean that there is something wrong with the child? No. It means that this child's brain is developed differently. Right? So it's very important to understand its neurodivergence is different, not in any way deficit. Very important to understand, because I have seen the moment someone recognize, oh, this child is neurodivergent, I can see the panic in them, as if there is, I get the concern, because that means that we need to provide that specific support system around that developmental needs, but that doesn't mean that we need to panic. We need to treat that as something wrong. It just means that we need to take a different approach. So now, colleagues, given that we are understanding the differences in our own framework, our ICF framework, and how it's different when we apply it to the developing brain, we also look at different types of development. And now we are moving towards what is really learning. So if you would like to engage, I would like to invite at this point, what do you think is learning? What is learning? So while some of you colleagues may gather your insights, please feel free to share them in the chat box so that we can all hear from your perspectives, right? However, I will now go on sharing it from a developmental perspective just to save our time. Oh, I see a comment coming in. Let's quickly read at least one. Matru says, forming neural connections of what I should feel and do based on situations. Oh, very good insight. Excellent insight. And also the sense of self, sense of others, sense of the world. Yes, exactly. Oh, yes, Marthu. Yesterday we talked about that. Absolutely. That right there actually is what learning is. So I'm very glad that you bring this insight to the session. Thank you. We have Leona sharing, it is the process of acquiring absolutely knowledge. Shimpi says learning is giving language to our intuitive knowledge. Oh, I love that. Acquire new knowledge. Janice says, I'm sorry if I'm not pronouncing your names correctly, colleagues. Please excuse me. But yes, so these are great insights. Acquire new skills. Also, absolutely, acquire new knowledge and skill is learning, right? So I think, colleagues, now if we put all these insight that you shared together, we have something quite powerful already to begin with from a practical perspective. And this is what I like about it. Ying Hong says, know self. Exactly. Before we learn about anyone else, we first learn about ourselves. So you see, we have some really wonderful golden nuggets coming up. So these are practical explanation of what learning is. So now let's put this into, let's look at it from a developmental perspective. Darlene I'm sorry if I'm not pronouncing the name. One definition of learning is making meaningful connections from the inner world to the outside world. Amazing. I love that insight. So now let's combine all of them together. What is learning? Right? So learning actually is exactly everything that all of you said. It is the biological, emotional, relational process where our brain, this organic machine, forms new connections, literally new connections, new neural connections, and also not just new ones, but strengthen the existing ones. And this is why when we learn something, our neural pathways become stronger. But if we stop that, they die down, right? So this is what happens in language, for example. If we did not practice the language, we forget. So some of you said it's not just only learning knowledge, but also skills, right? This is the most amazing thing about our brain. It excites me every time. That's why I'm so passionate about neuroscience, because every time I learn about it, it gives me hope. Because I personally, colleagues, I will share my story time and then as we progress through. I myself know someone who come from a dysfunctional family background, someone who has experienced childhood trauma, adversities, and I also know that post-traumatic growth is absolutely possible. Healing is possible. Our brain resilience it's true. So this is what truly healing is, learning, right? This is where people say, have you heard? In coaching, I have heard many times our professionals help clients. They say, my coach helped me um, unlearn, unlearn, and uh, unlearn and relearn. This is what I often hear. They say, so what does that mean? Our professional coaches within their capacity already with the developed brain, they are already able to help our clients create those new neural networks and change them even. And this is the beauty of professional coaching on the developing brain. And also, like some of you said, it's also the lifelong process. This is the beauty of our brain, like I said. It doesn't stop at any point that, oh, I no longer want to learn. If we feed it, it will learn. And this is why modern psychology, especially that our world is becoming more and more aware of trauma and mental health conditions. There are now new research going on how keeping ourselves active like dancing, learning a language, social connections, for example, like body movement practices like yoga and Pilates can even prevent and can be solutions to mental health conditions like Alzheimer's and dementia and conditions like this, because it keeps our neural connections alive. Of course, these research need to be conducted more thoroughly, and the data will, it's psychology, it always changes, but it's so hopeful to see that we are becoming more aware because of this reason. Our brain can learn at any point that we teach it to, and that's the beauty of our brain. Whatever we teach it, it learns. So think about it. When we grow up, we didn't even have to teach. Our brain we didn't have to teach anything to our brain. It learned by just living. And this is what Murthu said earlier. In attachment, we just live and learn. So this is what we are talking about, literally, isn't it? Neuroplasticity. So learning is neuroplasticity, the enhancement of our neural connections and our ability for our brain to learn. Now, I know some of you colleagues, you are also part of my brother Fernando's sessions, and he will be talking about trauma and also especially the psychedelic integration in healing trauma. The reason is because we know adult brain is concrete brain. We are in our cognitive stage, where the cognitive stage adults in is concrete motor stage. So our brain is literally concrete. right? It's already developed its pathways, meaning your hardwire, yesterday we talked about this, our hardwire is done. And this is why, let's say, for example, learning a language is much harder as an adult compared to a child. Why? It's because our brains, that capacity is already hardened. So let's say when we heal sometimes even deep trauma, we cannot get to, after certain point of our cognitive processing, we can't get to deeper psychological subconscious levels because we do not have the same neuroplasticity capacity as children. And this is when we use medicine, very powerful plant medicine like psilocybin or psychedelic treatments can create a transformation because it catalyzes in a therapeutic environment done in the right setting. It brings back this neuroplasticity ability of our brain, just like how it was when you were a child. This is why it's easy to mold there, right? This is why I think um, uh, I think Douglas Frederick Douglass, if I'm not mistaken, said that it's easy to raise healthy children than repair broken men. And this is what he meant, because once our brain is structured in a certain way, it's much harder to rewire it. But as children, because our neuroplasticity capacity is such, anything that we children live, they learn. So we have been talking about this. So let's very quickly look at what happens in the brain, colleagues. So this is what I said today. I want to show you the neuroscience part of it also very briefly, but let's look at what is really happening in the brain, right? So when we learn what is happening, we talk about the neuroplasticity, the brain's ability to create new pathways. We strengthen that every time we learn something, we increase our neuroplasticity. And then synaptic strengthening. Have you heard the saying, neurons that fire wire together? That's what it means. So our neurons talk to each other. So the more we train our brain, the more we practice a skill, the more we read. This is why reading is phenomenally impactful for learning, right? Because it engages your brain, your emotions, your body, your eye movement, everything. And then myelination, which is if you, so we have the axons, the neural pathways, and when you look at the brain, colleagues, you see the white mat uh, in our brain, and that's covered in the axons are covered in this mat. It's actually fat and protein, and this is what um, speed the communication process between neurons. So for example, in adolescence, this process is still ongoing, right? In children development, the development of the child's brain, this myelination hasn't happened yet. So meaning their communication between limbic system to prefrontal cortex is much slower than an adult. And this is why sometimes we think, why this child can't think and do something? Why can't? It's because they literally can't. It's because their limbic system hasn't talked to their prefrontal cortex yet. The reason is not because they are stupid, if I may use that word. It's not because they are underdeveloped. It's literally because their brain is still in the process of developing those parts, meaning the architecture of the brain, so that when we become an adult, we can, those parts of the brain functions properly. And then also the memory consolidation, converting our life experiences into long-term knowledge. And this is what some of you earlier shared, learning the sense of self. No one make you sit down and did you ever learn who you are by someone making you sit down and this is who you are now? No. You were born, you were given a family, you were given a name, you were given a religion, and all that, everything that came up as soon as you were born. And then from that moment onwards, you learn who you were based on how people interacted with you. Right? This is what we briefly learned in our attachment part yesterday. So, meaning, as children, our growing brain, it lives, and then it translates those lived experiences into long-term knowledge. Some of them are stored in our brain capacity, some of them are in our nervous system, some of them are stored even our fascia, the thin tissues in our brain, in our body. So when we think memory storage, do not only think about the hippocampus, colleagues. We store memory everywhere as a human being in our body, right? So if you are interested to learn more about these topics, I highly recommend you to read the book, The Body Keep the Score, written by Dr. Bassel van der Kolk. And it is one of the best books, honestly speaking, I have read. And in that book, he very bravely talk about how disrupted childhood is the number one cause of mental health conditions. So if you're interested, I invite you to read it. It's a really good book. I have read it. I mean, I still read it because several times I read it, but I continue to read it time and again because every time I read it, it just blows my mind and it motivates me to learn something new every time. Right. So coming back to now, let's understand, colleagues, how does really learning occur? Learning happens through relationships, period. Especially as children, learning happens through relationships by exploring the environment, by brain receiving information, right? When we engage in the environment, our brain receives information, and these experiences is what shape the neural pathways. This is what we said earlier. And then what happens is it's the repetition, repeated experiences, not just one experiences. This is why when you practice a skill, you need to repeatedly practice it. You know, no one wake up one day and become a world-class ballerina. That's impossible unless there's some kind of a miracle. But even that, we know that it's not possible biologically, physiologically, it's not possible for us to be there because we need to train it. Everything else is the same. So imagine whatever repeats more frequently is going to be the predominant learning in our system. Emotions give meaning to knowledge. We experience something and then based on that sensory input, we also make meaning. And this is what some of you said, we make meaning of who we are. We make meaning of who am I surrounded by, and also the world around me. What is this world? Is it safe? Is it not safe? Should I be scared? Right? Because know that our brain has one purpose. It doesn't care about whether you are happy or you achieve your goals, you have an amazing life partner, you have money. It doesn't care about any of that. It cares about only one thing only, which is your survival. So that's why the brain needs to memorize with emotion. Okay, this is danger. I shouldn't do that. This is someone yelled at me. I shouldn't put myself there. It's not safe for me to be seen in the world. It's not all that. So also it's important to remember, colleagues, learning is not just memorizing and performing and achieving and taking some bunch of information into our brain. That's not learning. Learning actually is everything all of you said. All of you think very highly. You are very informed in this topic already. I can see that, right? So you understand this is really about adapting. It's not just reading something. I mean, think about it. How many times, sometimes I go into this mode and I read. I realize after 5 minutes, oh, I have been reading this page for 5 minutes, right? Why is that? It just read. Nothing went into the brain. So adapting, understanding, connecting, growing, evolving. This is what truly learning is. And this is why sometimes, even as a professional coach, you may work with a client. They don't know who they are. They don't have a sense of self. But by working with you, right? I know some of you are even trauma informed. So you work with the client, you help them deeply reflect, and then they unlearn who they were before from all that childhood stuff. And then they start to rebuild themselves, relearn who they are. So developing a new sense of self. And this is where, colleagues, I said, post-traumatic growth is absolutely real, because we can truly help the client to develop a sense of self that they never, ever had the privilege of cultivating. So why do we learn? I mean, this is just basic knowledge, right? But just for the sake of sharing, we need to learn for survival. If we didn't learn, we will not survive. That's why strategy is needed, right? I don't mean to say that we need to be manipulative, but look at the grandness of everything, colleagues. Everything is a manipulation. Everything is a strategy in this universe, right? Including the solar system is it's a manipulation, energy manipulation itself. So in order for us to survive, we need to be able to strategically learn and adapt. We need to learn how it works. We need to learn how the system works so that we can part of it. This is why we need connection. So we also learn to connect because we need to connect. And then we learn to grow and to master. Human beings are, look at human beings. We are crazy about mastering something. Why some of you are here? I mean, all of you are, right? You have the knowledge, you have the skill, but you're still here. Why? Because you're thirsty for knowledge, you're thirsty for growth and mastery. That's why you are here. So you look for opportunities where you can, where it provide you with that opportunity. This is why I said you could have been anywhere in the world right now, but you are here. It's because your brain wanted to evolve. So also having in mind, learning is cognitive, it's relational. We will see what that means. It's absolutely emotional, and it's sensory. Of course, without sensory, we cannot learn anything. It's experiential. Now, let's look at how learning originates. And now these are just few factors, colleagues, but do you know that we are born unfinished mammals, right? Most, if you look at some mammals, they are, within few hours, they are independent. But human infants are born with only about 25% of brain development. Very helpless, very scary to be in a completely crazy, noisy world, not having just 25 brain development. Imagine that, how scary that is for a new brain. And the remaining 70%, of course, these are just database numbers, colleagues. The rest of the 70% develops through caregiving, environment, and experiences. And that's also why we are super adaptable, relational, and learning driven, right? Think about it. In the survival, evolution, what does evolution favor? Not the smartest, not the most intelligent, the most flexible, the most adaptable. What does that mean? Most learnable. I don't know if that's a word, but someone who is learning is someone who is evolving, right? And this is why we need to choose our tribe very carefully, because our survival depends learning from other people. So it can be learning whatever that you want to learn. So if you are constantly surrounded by people who, let's say, talk bad about other people, gossip, or, like problems. I mean, I'm not saying that talking about problems are bad, but, we need to be sensible. Or talk about, really things that's not purposeful, and do bad things in life, like not having purpose and harming other people, stealing, cheating. So if you're surrounded by people like this, then we know what we are learning. This also includes the media you consume, your social media. If you look at a specific, any post more than specific number of seconds, your algorithm will automatically push you more and more and more and more such content. So before you even know it, default, you just watching someone else's agenda, content based on someone else's agenda. And every time you engage, you learn. Not consciously. Our system is subconscious. It learns whether you like it or not, you learn. So be very careful who you surround yourself with. And this is also why when we work with children, we need to be very careful who we surround them by themselves. So one of the things, colleagues, actually right now happening is, as I'm also starting our developmental center in Bangkok, I work with certain clients, and their lifestyle is such that they need to have an external caregiver like a nanny. So there, one of the concerns parents come to me is that I am away and my child is with the nanny, and I want my nanny to have this education. So we also have different programs. Um, some of these programs are online created, so that our parents also have, the parenting clients that we work with, they also have that support, that they take this caregiving program, and they make those knowledge and skills available to their caregivers at home, so that everyone surrounding the child is developmentally informed, right? So even to that level, there are very intentional parents like that. At least I work with those parents. So I want to really honor those parents that I work with, very intentional, very thoughtfully think about who their children associate with. So yeah. Now we know curiosity is one of our fundamental coaching skills. If we do not have this skill, we cannot be a coach. You know that this is your coaching presence at any level. Without curiosity, there is no coaching. So now let's look at how curiosity is biologically wired into the human brain. Now, if you have worked with a little child, you know how many questions they ask. Why? But why? But why? But why? We are like that. We are born very curiously. And then along the journey, down the line somewhere, we stop asking questions. We stop being curious, and we just go with the flow, conformity, what everyone else do. So now I'm going to show you this specific video, colleagues. Like I said earlier, no one has to teach anyone how to learn. I'm going to show you this. This is an experiment, Trunkin's still face experiment. This shows how children learn emotional responses through just living, just being in the environment, right? So I'm going to share that in the chat room, so that way I don't get banned by YouTube sharing their material without permission. I don't want to be flagged for copyright, so I'm going to share it in the chat room. Please watch it. Would love to hear your insight when you come back in the chat room. I would have loved to collaborate with you in discussion, but given the time limitations, colleagues. So here is the link. Please watch it, and let's talk about it. Yes. So I hope that you were able to watch the video, colleagues. If you have any insights, exactly, Madison. I know it is indeed a heartbreaking experiment, and I do not believe in these kind of experiments. And actually, I was going to show some another type of experiment, but I thought it's a little too intense, given that not all of us come from the same developmental understanding. I didn't want to overwhelm you, but as you can see, please share your. I understand. I don't know who is CEC, but I do. I can imagine that it's a bit hard to watch, right? Uh, but what were your observations, colleagues? If you would like to share in the chat room, I would be very happy to see them, your insights. So in case if you would like to share something, please feel free to um, share them in the chat room. Oh, I see a couple of insights coming up. Um, Kids mirror humans, absolutely. We just witnessed that, right? It's so painful to watch, but it communicates. It really matters to be present. Exactly. So as you can see, our colleagues, you are already seeing why. So you see in this experiment, colleagues, no one told the child ever what to do, how to feel, what to think. The child just observed and it mirrored. And this is what we all did in our childhood. This is what we all do even now. Your nervous system is constantly scanning the environment and watching and learning. How should I behave? How should I not behave? How should I adapt? The reason why this little baby was so attuned to that adult's emotional responses and what they did by learning. What do we say? What do we actually, when we say learned or mirrored the behavior, what really happened in that baby's response is it learned how to adapt in the environment. It learned, okay, if I behave this way, that expression means this. So this is what I said earlier. They don't just go through life just like that. Every experience has an emotional meaning to a human being. Forget about child development. This is you, yourself, our self, colleagues, because we were a child at one point, right? So every human being that you interact go through exactly the same process. Of course, we have different developmental designs, but we still go through similar uh, processes. So this is why it's important to understand interaction with a child is not just an interaction. It shows the child where they belong, how they should live. So now let's see where actually learn begins. How? Through senses. Babies, if you have seen a baby, you know how much they are in tune with their senses. They touch everything, they put everything in their mouth, they move a lot, they want to see everything, they want to smell everything because they have their sensory. Our sensory at an early stage is absolutely extremely activated because the reason is if our senses are not activated, how would we receive information? In order for us to absorb information from the environment, our sensory receptors needs to work actively. So sensory input wires the brain for emotional and cognitive growth. This is what I just said. And so if you remember earlier, we talked about how our early sensory experiences shape the neural architecture, meaning just basically living. Sensory experiences means, colleagues, living. When you live, we by default, our sensory inputs absorb all the information and then it's registered, and then based on that, it design the architecture. We have no control over any of these things. What control we have is to control the environment. So we absorb information that we actually need. As an adult, we have that capacity. For example, if let's say someone is in an abusive, insecure relationship, they can say, what is this? I don't want to be treated like this. I don't want to put up with this nonsense. I'm walking away. So you get up and you say, okay, bye-bye. We are not a good match. I'm walking away. However, that relationship, you end it and you move on because you know that is not the environment you want to live. But think about it for a child. They are born in a dysfunctional family system. Do you think the child has a saying in that? Oh, I'm born into a dysfunctional family system. I don't want to live here. You don't treat me well. I'm going away. The child doesn't have that. They are helpless. They have to live their environment. Whatever the environment we provide, they have to live it. They have no choice. And that's why it's in our hand. This is why I said even yesterday, this is something that we need to parenting, child development, whatever that we do with a child, we need to do it with uttermost responsibility, intentionality, and yes, colleagues, we really, I lost the word, it'll come to me, but yeah. So exploration is the first form of learning. We explore. That's why children are very curious. They ask why? There are so many questions because they want to explore. Learning also originates through co-regulation, how parents and caregivers interact with a child, because we will look at this part. So regulation is equal safety. When we are in a safe space, we are in a more curious and learning environment. Like we said yesterday, if you were part of the conversation, colleagues, may I invite you to keep your microphones muted so that we can have an uninterrupted conversation. Thank you. We discussed yesterday, looking at the three nervous system states, that when we are in our regulated states, which is the green zone, we are in a state of curiosity and learning. So today we will see how that occurs. And emotional attunement is what builds the brain safety so that it can learn. Right, so this is something I'm going to skip. Okay, colleagues, now that we have seen several conditions that, all right, Monica, hold on. Please allow me to, if you haven't left the meeting yet. Colleagues, I'm going to share the CCE link so that in case if you have to step out, I understand, but you still get the certification. I want you to have it. So here is the link in case if you would like to, please feel free to sign in so that you can have it. All right, let's go back to our presentation. Now that we have seen different aspects of how learning originates, colleagues, let's look at one of the fundamental fact that impact the learning brain, which is attachment. So yesterday we discussed this. All of us arrived on earth like this, helpless little baby. We have no self-regulatory skills or emotional awareness. Therefore, we entirely dependent on a caregiver. So this is where our attachment come to play, because if we ask ourselves, what is the most basic need here for a human baby? Right? Yesterday conversation, we shared safety, warmth, love, food, shelter, all that. But would you agree, colleagues, without connection, without an attuned caregiving figure, none of those needs will be met. So it's important for us to understand from a developmental perspective, connection for human beings is not just relational, it's neurobiological. We need this for our survival. So when we look at our attachment system it's not something, attachment is not some romanticized philosophy like I said yesterday. It's a biological system in our body, our brain, that push us to. It activates us to seek connection in a state of, let's say, stress or threat, so that we reach out to someone so that we can feel safe. Think about it. As a baby, if no one cared for you, what would that mean? That's abandonment, physical abandonment. Now, what would physical abandonment mean to a child, to a baby? Death. So do you see how intelligent our system is? And this is why children cry madly when the parent leave them at the daycare facility, for example, because that cry for to prevent the separation is what this attachment system do. So the child is not crying because they are stubborn or they are spoiled. It's because there is a system inside that telling the child you need to stay connected to your caregiver, otherwise you will die. That's what's happening. So we need to understand as developmental catalysts that connection is survival. It's like we have an internal alarm system that constantly alert us to seek connection so that our system can feel safe. And this is where some of our colleagues mentioned this learning from yesterday. When we do this repeatedly, we learn, our brain create pathways which we call internal working models. These are really, in general language, this is the mental representations or emotional maps that our psyche creates based on those repeated relational experiences. So it learns three components. We have three components of our learning. Model of self. Who am I? Sense of self. Then we also learn about who are others. Can I rely on them? And then we learn about the sense of the world. Now, I'm going to take this to the next level today, briefly. So this is how the cycle goes, colleagues, right? There is a child, normal, but all of a sudden, the child can feel threat. It can be hunger, it can be weather, it can be some sensory input. So the child feel the need to connect. They reach out to the parent, which is what their attachment tells them to do. So the child either go cling to their parent or the cry or ask for attention. And then let's say based on the caregiving response, the child system learns, did I receive the connection? Did I not receive the connection? Am I worthy of it? None of this happens cognitively. Remember, experiences create emotions without your influence. So this is why learning is dangerous, because it just happens. So let's say if the comfort is received, our system, it deactivates. The young brain feels safe, regulated, and secure. However, let's say if the comfort is not received, let's say chronically or inconsistently, the system stays alert, dysregulation, hypervigilance, hyperactivation, or it can even shutting down, and later leading to insecure attachment patterns. So one of the fundamental things when it comes to our developing brain, colleagues, this is so important. The most important thing for our brain to learn is to have a regulated, emotionally caregiving presence. That's what creates that internal neurological safety. So our nervous system is in a state of calm, regulated, where it can focus, the cortexes can naturally engage, the bonding hormones like oxytocin, serotonin is increased, where cortisol and adrenaline levels are down. So our system is in a state of relax, because it knows that in case something goes wrong, I have someone to go back to. There is a caregiving figure. Safety is the most important need. And then the second part is having a safe environment to explore. So two things. One, having a safe caregiver or regulated adult figure. The second is the environment. So do you now see when you work in a professional coaching setting or as a parent, these are two conditions that is required for healthy development, just like a plant need water and sunlight. It's that simple. So this is why, colleagues, I mentioned yesterday the polyvagal chart. If you understand the polyvagal theory or just the nervous system, we know that we go into these different states. I'm not going to repeat this given we have only limited time. When you have the video available, I hope you will be able to watch this. But the bottom part, colleagues, the green zone is where when we are regulated, this is where we are, and this is where we need to be when we study, when we learn. And this is where children needs to be, their nervous system needs to be when they learn. Now, in my case, now I'm going to combine the story and the knowledge, right? So in my case, colleagues, some of those you don't know what was really happening in my life. I grew up in a extremely dysfunctional family system. It's not because my parents are bad. I love them deeply. Our relationship is healed and we travel together. In fact, my parents are going to be here on the 24th of May. In just 2 weeks, they are going to be in Bangkok and we are going to travel. So we have a beautiful relationship now. We have understood each other, forgiven each other for certain things. However, colleagues, when I grew up, my mom, she experienced her own emotional chaos, including abandonment as a very little girl, 4-year-old girl. Her father committed suicide when she was 4 years old, and my grandma was just 37 years old, and she had 5 children to feed. And she came from a very good family. She was treated like a princess, and she never had to do any work. And she was married to this person, and who was my grandfather, and then he committed suicide, just leaving her a note without even not even having a reason. He died. So and then what happened was my grandfather's family, immediately the very same day my grandfather died, they kicked my grandmom and my mom and her siblings out of that house. And she couldn't go back to her home with 5 children. I mean, look at this, is like decades ago. She was on the road, colleagues. Literally, my grandmother was on the road and she had to work so hard. I'm talking about manual labor. She had to work so hard to feed 5 stomachs, 3 boys and 2 girls. And my mother grew up in such chaotic environment, and therefore she developed severe mental health conditions. And so I grew up with an emotionally chaotic mother. She had certain conditions. I don't want to name here, but my mom had conditions where her personality would split. Her personality would change. And one day she is the most loving, most caring, most amazing mother. And next day, you don't know who you will see. She was the scariest person, and she was so unpredictable. And on top of that, because the inconsistency of her nervous system, she used to get frequently ill, physically ill. Like she would have maniac episodes and she would just collapse. And imagine me and my brother, we were very small and we had to witness that. So my mother will be in her hospital at least 4-5 times a month, if not a week, if we are lucky. And she would be hospitalized 3-4 days. So mostly my brother would look after me. He's 4 years older to me. So he was a child. He was a parentified child because he had to raise me. He had to do everything. And my father, on the other hand, seeing my mom suffers, his love of his life, he's the most wonderful man. He was so he was involved in duty, but my father was never really emotionally present. And he was on top of that, he has addictions, like he was addicted to alcohol. So he would numb himself day and night. And so I grew up with a mentally ill mother and an alcoholic father. This was my life, colleagues. And I grew up in this environment my entire years. And many times I would be in kinship care where my brother also couldn't take care of me, where my mom had to go more than a week or so in the hospital. I will be in kinship care. Someone will be looking after me. And I remember there were moments my mom was in the hospital, and this experience, I'm still working through that, and it still shows up time to time. And I remember um, I was uh, I was kept in my mom's sister's house, and I was sitting in the evening, I think around 5 o'clock. I was so hungry, I was so dirty. I remember like I didn't have a shower. I mean, my hair is very curly. As a child, I have very long, very length, like thick hair, and I was like scratching my hair. I was sitting on the step, and I was screaming, I was crying. I wanted my mom so badly. I missed her so much. And I remember my uncle was shouting at me to telling me to stop crying. And I was what, about 6 years old. And I remember, colleagues, I now when I look back at that, I remember that I used to cry to sleep like that many, many days of my life as a child. So now you may see, as a little child who was completely or repeatedly was under pressure, activated nervous system, having to go to school and having to regulate in an environment where educators had no understanding whatsoever what was happening in my house, and having to do with that. And also on top of that, I had very strict educators. So that's truly where the problem was. It wasn't because I was not intelligent enough to study or anything like that. It was purely because my attachment system was so disrupted that the nervous system couldn't be in a state of ventral vagal, which is the social engagement for the brain to be curious, learn, and so on, right? And constant that chronic stress led me to, at the age of 16, to the point that the nervous system couldn't take that anymore. So this is why I meant by at age 16, my nervous system was already in the red zone, in the dorsal vagal, as you can see, disassociation, numbness, and depression here. So I was clinically depressed, and I had to go on medication and all that hassle after that. But this is what happens, colleagues. So now I'm briefly going to share with you what the brain process, the neuro process of learning, right? So this is when it comes to learning, have you seen that we try to change the behavior, we try to teach the concept, and the child never gets it. No matter how many times we try, the child just doesn't get it. It's not because the child is stupid. It's not because child is manipulative and lazy and all those things that generally we think they are. It's because we are trying a wrong approach when it comes to learning. Our brain learns from bottom-up development. I will show you what this is. Of course, this is a terminology, but I will show you what that means in practicality. How the brain capacity is developed in a way that it's in a right state to learn. Like, for example, if you just throw some seed in an environment, it will not grow. It will not grow. Like, for example, if you throw, say, apple seeds in a desert, it will not grow because the conditions are not right. I mean, it's not rocket science, it's common sense. And that's why we plant desert, like date trees in the desert, and we plant apple trees where the weather is more cooler, right? Condition matters. So when it comes to learning, of course it matters. So when we say the bottoms up build process, this means, colleagues, how the brain structure engages. So the very first part engaged in our brain is the brain stem. Survival and regulation, we will see that in the image. Second part is the limbic system. The third part, the last part, is the prefrontal cortex. Usually what we try to do is we try to engage the child's prefrontal cortex. We try to get them to think first, to reflect first, change the behavior first, fix the child first. So we are operating from prefrontal cortex, which is the last brain part that engages in developing brain when it comes to learning. So what does that mean? This means, colleagues, safety needs to come first. Therefore, we feel connected, and then comes the cognition. And so this is why children can't reason without, if they are dysregulated. We can't lecture the scared brain into learning. We can't punish, especially we can't punish a nervous system into calm. And we can't shame a child into confidence. Now, if we take a step back, would you not agree that we do all these things to our children? If I speak about, for the sake of example, I experienced all these things as a child, although it wasn't really anything to do with my fault. And this is what I saw when I went into the education system. I saw children now and again struggling with the very same problems that I struggle with, but it has a different face. It had a different family background, but the problems were exactly the same. So now let's look at, colleagues, what does that really mean? So we are looking at the brain stem. This is the vital, the stalk-like part of our brain connecting the spinal cord to the midbrain, pons, and medulla oblongata. And this is actually, colleagues, when we look at the brain stem, we are looking at the nerve system, especially the vagus nerve. Now, this is what constantly scan, am I safe? Our nervous system constantly scan, am I safe? Am I hungry? Am I there? Is there danger? Is someone protecting me? So even now, if you did not realize, your system, your nervous system is constantly scanning for these. So this is why the nervous system regulation is so crucial. Without regulating the nervous system, we really cannot get to that point of safety. So the primary function of our brain stem is, this is where we say the brain gut connection. This controls breathing, heart rate, arousal and alertness, sensory filtering, stress responses, and so this is how the brain process that safety come first, right? Think about it. When we are alert, our heart, our breath is shallow. Heart palpitations. We experience physical symptoms, but as children, we don't know how to explain that. So as a child, we might be fidgeting because we are experiencing something physiologically. But remember what we said, children do not have the language to communicate that. So their behavior is their communication. And what happens often, behavior get labeled, judged, and punished often. So if you were part of the conversation yesterday, you know that the moment brainstem is dysregulated, which means our nervous system is dysregulated, our nervous system will put us through those different stress responses like fight or flight or fawn or even freeze and collapse states. Yeah. Now, the reason why the brain stem is important, colleagues, the nervous system needs to be regulated because the nervous system constantly is there an emotionally regulated person. Because remember, we are not only regulating ourselves, but we are also regulating with the child as we engage because they do not have that nervous system capacity. So meaning When you engage with a child, you need to ask yourself, where is my nervous system regulation today? How regulated am I? Can I co-regulate with this child for real today? Right? So this is what need to cross our mind. So when you prepare your coaching engagement with a minor, now I invite you to ask yourself how much of this part goes into your coaching engagements. How do you prepare the safety? How do you provide that brainstem activation? Then the second part, colleagues, let's look at it very quickly. This is our limbic system, which you know is the emotional brain. Amygdala is in control, which is our fear center. If activated, hyperactivated, it takes all the blood, majority of the blood. So therefore, the rest of the brain parts receive less blood. Therefore, they have less capacity of development. And it's the limbic system that make meaning with the experience child learn. So based on the interaction, the limbic system thinks, oh, I'm loud or not loud. I am seen or not seen. Am I understood? Do I belong here? Is this person trust? Nothing is spoken through experience, repeated experience. Brain already decided for you. It already made meaning based on those emotional signals. So the primary function of our limbic system is the attachment and bonding. Now, do you now see why it's important for us to have a regulated caregiver? Because your connection becomes their connection. Your regulation becomes their regulation. This is also is responsible for emotional memory, motivation, meaning releasing dopamine, which leads to reward and pleasure, and of course, social connection. So when the system feels safe, it's in an environment for social engagement, which is connection. So now we are looking at, first we need to set the nervous system, then we engage our limbic system with safe connection. So emotional safety. Now, if you look at coaching competency 4, cultivating trust and safety, if I may ask, what comes up for you? Right? Especially modifying it to developing brain. I'm going to skip these colleagues because it's going to exaggerate. I mean, it's going to expand the session given we have only limited time. I will wrap it here. And then we also have the second part, which is the prefrontal cortex, which all of you know, this is our thinking and learning brain. As you can see in the picture, it's our frontal lobe. And this is all our executive function skills are activated here. Focus, reasoning, planning, impulse control, working memory, reflection, learning new information, all that. Now, if you look at coaching, this is what happens in coaching. Focus, reason, plan, accountability, control impulse, manage emotions, memory, reflections. Why do we ask powerful inquiries? Reflect and learning new information. Now, do you see, colleagues, before we get a child to coach, actually like literally coach, there are other brain parts that we need to actively engage so that their prefrontal cortex is ready. It's like the soil is now ready for the plant to be seeded. That's what I mean. We need to engage these brain components. So, and also not to forget that the prefrontal cortex is the last brain part to mature. I think up until 21, 23, our prefrontal cortex develop. Is extremely sensitive to stress and easily can shut down by fear of pressure or authority or punishment, criticism, shame, and guilt. And this is why sometimes you know what the action that you want to take, but you can't take it. Right? So imagine now translate this into child brain. Now, why top-down teaching fails, which is the traditional way of teaching? In the model that I show you, it's the bottom-up. We need to first safety, connection, and learning. But why traditional way fails? Because we focus on the opposite direction. We expect children to think before we make them ever feel safe. We demand focus. Look at high pressure school environment. We don't pay attention to the brain nervous system regulation. We just put so much pressure on children, academic pressure, after school curricular activities, all this unnecessary pressure. Do we ever consider, goodness me, there is a nervous system behind all this. What is happening there? And we try to correct behavior without really regulation of emotions. And if you may have heard the whole child development concept altogether, we talk about connection before correction. This is what it means. And we also push learning without any connection. And this is why it fails, colleagues, because the brain is not ready and we are operating the brain structure. It's like we are pushing wrong buttons, literally. Literally, we are pushing the wrong buttons. So what children really need is physical safety, emotional safety. They need to know that they are emotionally safe. And this, I can talk about, this will be another session altogether. What is emotional safety when working with a child? Predictability. Children need to, adolescent children, the developing brain needs to predict what is happening next. That's how it creates safety. If it doesn't know what's happening next, it's in a very uncertain state. So the amygdala is hyperactive because it's the fear center. It needs to know what's happening next. Connection with a trusted adult. They need to know that I can rely on this person. And co-regulation. Being able to calm their internal chaos with an adult who is already regulated. And this is why, colleagues, I said, for me, it's a sacred space I step into. So I make sure if I have sessions, like for example, my in-person sessions are about, let's say, if it's a younger child, it's about 90 minutes because a session could go up to 60 minutes. And that 30 minutes I need as a buffer time before I see my next young client, because I need to regulate myself. I take it very seriously. I have my way of a process that I do before I see a minor client, because I want to be at my best window of tolerance when I meet that client. And if there is for some reason, if I can't do it, then I make other plans, whether another practitioner can take the child or something like that, or we postpone, because I want to make sure that I am regulated, because that child's development entirely depend on how I show up to that child. So, yeah. So this is where, colleagues, the secure attachment come to play, because what secure attachment literally does is to the brain and the nervous system, blood flow increases to the prefrontal cortex. So therefore it can function better rather than get amygdala getting all the blood. And therefore the working memory improves and they are able to control their impulses. And so finally, we can bring them to a place of problem solving. Before we tell them, so what should we achieve today? What goal should we achieve today? Do you see that there are lots of different strategically designed steps that needs to come first, knowing that we need to first activate their different brain regions. Right. So I'm not going to discuss any of these things, colleagues. And tomorrow on the 17th, let me look at the time. Yeah, actually, this is what I'm going to do. I will stop sharing. Now I don't want to leave you overwhelmed here, because you may see now that we need to follow a different structure. And also, colleagues, another thing I want to show you is this. And then we will conclude our conversation. So here We now, as much as we look at the attachment, we also need to remember children grow. Oh, why is this? As we speak, as we work with them, children naturally, they are in an ongoing development, right? So that means they also go through developmental stages. And this is something that we must take into consideration when we work with younger clients, minor clients, meaning the developing brain. So if we look at the learning stages, and on top of that, there are different learning types, which I'm not going to show today because it's going to be way too overwhelming. So learning stages matter because we all learn in different stages differently. Our brain capacity is such, right? So at infancy, our sensory and emotional learning is high. So this is why I said if I'm working with an early group, especially early years group where I have toddlers and infants. This is something that, especially now that we are planning our developmental center, it is paced out. The sessions are paced out in a way that I have the maximum capacity to regulate with children. And then in early childhood, 3 to 6 years old, play-based and more imaginative learning. And this is why our approach when we work with these different age groups also need to change, because children, we can't just ask a bunch of questions and they will be able to tell us what they are thinking or what they want to do. Goal setting is very different when we work with different age groups. So middle childhood, age 7 to 11, they are more concrete. Now they have more concrete stage cognitive, so therefore they can logically make more sense. And then early adolescence, which is 12 to 15 years old, they are more social. This is the time that our identity start forming. So we need to be very careful in what we say, how they perceive themselves. So having that role model here is crucial, because think about it, they are literally developing an identity. And if they don't have a healthy reference point to build that identity on, what are they building that identity on? Right? These are important questions that we need to ask when we work with minors. And then the late adolescence is the 15 to 18 years old, which is now we can abstractly think, independent learning, we can challenge, we can think outside the box, different perspective, all that. So do you now see, depending on the brain capacity, how our coaching approach, skill set, presence, communication styles, everything needs to change, especially the strategy. We need to have a very different, this is why, colleagues, I say child development is not something that we can do with cookie cutter approach. So therefore, in this coaching can be the most beautiful, most powerful tool for parenting and child development, because we know in professional coaching, we don't tell the client what to do. Rather, we create a system around our client. And this is why, colleagues, in developmental coaching, in order for us to create that structure, now I believe you probably see it deeper, why we can't do it just with ICF coaching core competencies, just the 8 competencies, because we are working with a developing brain. Developing brain require a complete different skill set, approach, presence, and to the point that it also require a different level of nervous system regulation of the practitioner. Because honestly, when I work with adult clients, I don't need that much of regulation. 10 minutes is enough for me to go from one client to another, still regulating, depending on the situation. But with children, it's never the same for me. So I'm going to briefly show you, colleagues, the 4 domains of CADP coaching with minors, so that I don't leave you hanging. You know that ICF framework is not enough to work with children and adolescents. So let's see, what do you need to include? So perhaps you are already working with a minor. So maybe these are some of the things that you can consider. I know some of you have already left. Thank you for participating, colleagues, if you're watching the rest of the session. And also, in case, colleagues, if you want to leave, feel free to do that. However, I will continue to discuss this so that when you watch the replay, you have the whole session. Otherwise, I feel like it's incomplete, leaving you halfway, right? So 5 core domains of CADP coaching with minors, which you can also consider integrating into your existing practice. Relational foundation. Think about in your coaching environment, how much of relational foundation is developed through attachment and nervous system regulation. So I'm not going to go into each of these section, but think about how do you facilitate connection? How do you facilitate emotional safety, regulation and co-regulation? How much are you trauma informed and teaching? Like, for example, a child, like, let's say my situation, right? If I work with a child like me, I need to have trauma informed, because when I work with that kind of case, of course, those attachment trauma, those neglect, some of those abuse adversities are going to show up. So our informed, this is why developmentally, attachment, trauma informed. Prepared and developmentally responsive environment, not just having some coaching tools. How do they catalyze the sensory? Are they aligned with the child's sensory development? Is this environment, is it for neurotypical? Is it neurodivergent? How is it? And what kind of tools am I using? Are they age appropriate? Right? So these include all of that, colleagues. And then child-centered agency and active engagement. How do we get the child to be the center of what is happening, right? In adult coaching, it's easy that it's the adult who is in control. But how do you get the child to be in the center? And they are the one who is taking a proactive approach. How do you problem solve? Now we know the bottoms up processing, right? So how does that work? Critical thinking. Accountability. Do you now see, colleagues, action planning and accountability? It needs to come before those things come. Many things need to happen before. And then reflective and creative processing. How do you include creative reflections? Imagination. How do you use creativity and imagination? Like, for example, currently, as I told you, my parents are visiting just in 2 weeks, and I have already told my family to bring some of my Montessori educational materials that I used to. I used to have a Montessori House of Children's, a small developmental center in Colombo, Sri Lanka, colleagues. This was a long time ago. And then as I left the country, I had to give it up. However, I kept all my Montessori educational equipments, and now my parents are going to bring them here, which I will be using in my our development center. So what do I do by that? I will combine some of those Montessori education materials in a way that it creates the coaching environment more creative and engaging. And I have already planned, I'm currently planning lots of activities that I can combine the two, and how it can be so powerful when we work, because the coaching conversations with the child is not just conversational. It includes writing, it includes drawing, it includes molding, it includes dancing, it includes yoga poses. It's very active and engaging. Like I said, expressive modalities, because we need to remember children process through play, story, metaphor, and all those creative experiences. And then strength-based growth and structured program. No matter what we see in a child problem, we always see the strength. We focus on the strength of the child. So all the strengths that they have, we will be bringing them to the surface. We will build onto that. So how does that work in your practice? which means goal setting and visioning, right? How is that structured age appropriately, but also based in or rooted in strength-based approach, support system, and then especially their progress tracking. The reason is, in order for children to be motivated intrinsically, we need to catalyze that internal environment in a way that they feel excited to take part in that engagement. And this is why, colleagues, I said in my coaching approach, we combine different modalities. Like, for example, I know for a fact now that when I combine some of these Montessori educational equipments with some of my young clients, I know they are going to love it. I already know, I can already picture their face, and I know how much they are going to like to come to my next session, or how much they are going to be excited to go home and continue with the rest of the process, because I know I will deliberately create that stimulate that in their brain in such a way that using certain materials, activities, and bringing their brain to that state rather than forcing them to come up with some reflections. So here is why, colleagues, now we see that image again. It's very important as developmental catalysts, right? This is what I also mentioned yesterday. When you come into this space, truly it's a sacred space. Secondly, it's truly not just working with one client, colleagues. When you work with a child, you are creating generational transformation. And this is why I see this as not just a certification, as a movement, as a mission, because I truly believe that every child is like this, a magnificent seed carrying its own wisdom, potential inherently. What it needs is the right support system, right soil to grow. So, and also, like I said, as you briefly understand how the brain works, you also probably see how quickly brain can adapt, because we today studied learning, and our brain learns as long as it's active, right? So let's have in mind that every child is like an acorn, truly waiting to become a magnificent oak tree, carrying its own inherent potential. And what we need to do is, instead of looking at the child, even the child that they say is the most problematic, no, we refuse that. We take off that colored glasses and we look at the child and we see, no, I do not buy into this behavior problem. I know there is something else behind this behavior, and I know there is inherent potential, magnificent potential in that child, and I only see that. Because I see, as in, what I'm saying is, we see the butterfly in making. We do not get caught up in the caterpillar stage or the cocoon stage. We understand that it's a process that they go through, and they're gonna come out as the butterfly, and we already see that butterfly. And that's when, colleagues, you become a true developmental catalyst, going beyond your professional coaching role, which I know that you take very seriously. So with that, I conclude our conversation from here. However, please allow me to share, colleagues, we also have Ignite referral program. Like I mentioned, I want this program to be available to as many individuals as possible, so that we truly can go out there and create a systematic change. Currently, we are starting our level 1 program on the 20th of June. We have very few seats left. So if you know someone who might be interested in this program, please refer to them. Therefore, you will also receive your referral commission, and I'm very happy to share with you more information if you have anyone who might be interested in, if it's not for you. And also currently we have early bird discount running, so in case if you know someone, please feel free to refer them. Help us share this message around the world, colleagues. And also our programs are offered at very reasonable prices. The reason is, we truly believe in that education needs to be available to everyone, especially this kind of information. We also allow installment options. So in case if you know someone who might be needing this support, please know that it's available. Thank you for supporting me grow the community, and also thank you for supporting the world altogether by believing in this work that we all do together, colleagues. So with that, I thank all of you. Thank you for giving me your time, your space, and your patience, and more than anything, your intentional presence to connect with me. Once again, I hope that it's not too overwhelming, but I also wanted to show you the reality of coaching the developing brain, colleagues. And I think I have another session on the 17th with ICF Bangkok chapter, as I'm part of it. So I might see some of you there. If not, I know that you are in our community. Please feel free to reach out anytime if you have any questions, any support that you needed from us. Very happy to welcome you to our community. And once again, thank you so much for being part of this conversation and also believing in this important that we do together, colleagues. So with that, I say goodbye to you. Happy International Coaching Week. I will see you soon again. Bye for now.
Bye.
Bye bye.